Thank you, Mr. President. I disagree with the last speaker's characterization of the issue he was bringing up, but I want to stay focused on voting rights because this is an important moment for the United States Senate, our opportunity to debate the need for voting protection and voting rights. But I do want to make one comment. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have said that they welcome an opportunity to debate voting rights legislation and talk about ways that we can get this bill in a way that we can get bipartisan support. The majority leader several weeks ago offered a motion to proceed on voting rights, filed cloture so that we could get on the bill and have the type of debate that my colleagues now are telling us that they want to have, and not a single Republican voted to proceed on voting rights legislation at that time. So I find it a little bit disheartening to hear this newfound desire to start taking up voting rights when we've been negotiating and talking and debating this issue for now this entire Congress. We also have an historic opportunity to vote on voting rights if we take advantage of that opportunity. I represent the state of Maryland, and I know we've talked about 19 states that are moving in the wrong direction on protecting voting rights. Maryland is not one of those states. In fact, the Maryland legislature has taken steps to make it easier for voters to be able to register and cast their votes. And the Voting Rights Act was authored by my congressman, Congressman John Sarbanes, and I'm proud of the work that he has done because Marylanders recognize that we administer elections locally, but we need national standards. And that's why this legislation is under consideration. Mr. President, after the Civil War and Reconstruction, powerful officials sought to nullify the political outcome of the Civil War. They passed laws and instituted policies that enforced segregation. And we all know those laws. The Jim Crow laws, the Black Codes, the institutionalized segregation, they were enabled by Jim Crow laws that were aimed at disenfranchising minority voters. Poll taxes and literacy tests and voting intimidation, rationalized by protecting our national security or voter integrity. Thanks to courageous leaders, we were able to reverse those laws by presidents such as Harry Truman in 1948, in integrating our military, by our courts in the landmark decision in 1954, Brown v. Board of Education. Marylanders are proud of Thurgood Marshall, a native son of Maryland, the role that he played in arguing that case before the Supreme Court. And by our Congress with historic action in 1964 to pass the Civil Rights Act, in 1965, the Voting Rights Act, 1968, the Fair Housing Act. Today, we are now seeing a renewed effort for Jim Crow-type laws aimed at disenfranchising targeted voters. My colleagues have talked about it, and I'm not going to repeat it here today because I know the time is running short. We know that these laws are aimed at making it more difficult for minority communities to be able to cast their votes. My colleague from New Jersey talked about students. Marginal groups are targeted because those who are enacting these laws think that it will help them politically. Why now? The answer is pretty simple. The 2020 elections, an election where more people voted than ever before, judged to be the most secure election in American history. But because Donald Trump lost, for the first time in the history of this nation, we had the loser claim that the election was stolen in order to rationalize his loss. That big lie is what motivated legislatures to pass laws to make it more difficult for vulnerable people to be able to vote, to affect election results, presenting a clear danger to our democracy itself on voter integrity and the confidence that voters that our system is actually working. Now is the time for the Senate to show courage, to debate, as we're doing today, and vote on two bills. The Freedom to Vote Act sets minimum federal standards with state-administered election laws. We've gone through all the different provisions. I'm not going to go through them again, but we need to have these national standards because of the actions in these 19 states and other reasons such as the dark money that my colleague from Rhode Island pointed out, or voter intimidation issues and restoring democracy. There's so many issues that are in that are important to restore voting confidence. And we need to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to restore the Voting Rights Act because of the Supreme Court decision and restore pre-certification. And as has been pointed out by my colleagues, this has historically been supported by both Democrats and Republicans. And we could get, I think, one Republican vote to proceed to this, for those who are saying they want to debate this issue. Today, the senators will have the opportunity to vote, to be on the right side of history. The Senate filibuster prevented the passage of civil rights legislation to reverse the Jim Crow laws until finally in 1964, the filibuster ended and the Senate voted. By invoking cloture, we can vote now to protect the voting rights of Americans. We can do it right now by passing cloture and being on the right side of history. If cloture is denied, we'll have the opportunity to restore the Senate to its best traditions, to debate and vote, to require those who want to use Rule 19, and Rule 19 is our filibuster rule, to actually be on the floor and debate. No more pocket filibusters. The Senate rules changes that we've all been talking about, I've been listening to my colleagues. Let me just talk a little bit about changing Senate practice. Now, let alone a constitutional issue such as voting rights should have priority over any of the procedural issues that we have here on the floor of the Senate. And let alone restoring the Senate to a working body should have priority over the interpretations of some of our rules. But let me talk about the rule itself. If you look at the 20th century, basically legislation was considered on the floor of the Senate through comity and debate and compromise, and we were able to bring issues to the floor for vote. Rarely, very rarely, was a filibuster used. Why? Because you had to come to the floor and talk. It was very time-consuming. It took a lot of time off the Senate floor. It was inconvenient for the member to have to stand up here and talk. So we were able to come together. It wasn't through a cloture vote that it ended. It ended because people didn't want to go through the inconvenience of talking, or we were able to resolve it. So we're talking about restoring the Senate to its best traditions. Many have talked about we're going to change the filibuster rule. No, Mr. President, we're not suggesting changing the filibuster rule. The filibuster rule is come on the floor and speak. It's the cloture that's the 60 votes. You don't need cloture if you run the clock on filibuster. What we need to do is prevent dilatory actions, and that's why the leader's point's going to be important. But we're trying to restore the Senate to a body that can work together by requiring the members to come to the floor and speak and vote by how the framers of the Senate rules intended at the end of the day. And to my friend from West Virginia, and this gives us the chance to start to work together. I couldn't agree with you more. We do need to come together in a bipartisan way, let our committees work. We need to look at the Senate rules, but we first need to move on action. And this is a fundamental bill that we need to move forward. The leader is framing this in a very narrow way so we can get this bill moving, use this as an example to work together, Democrats and Republicans, so the Senate can restore its practices. So we all can be proud members of a body that debates and votes. That's what we do, respecting each member's rights and respecting minority rights. I urge my colleagues to support cloture, and if cloture fails, to support the leader's point and be on the right side of history. I yield the floor.